Today I have in two oranges. The one on bottom is an AD30R, and the owner says that it won't power up, no lights, etc. He checked the fuse. He says the fuse is fine. That's possible. It's also possible that the fuse is bad, but is visibly okay, or maybe a connection to the fuse has failed. If you look up a problem like this on the internet, a lot of people will say, it's the transformer, change the transformer. That can happen, but it's really, really rare for a power transformer to die in a high quality amp, and this is certainly a high quality amp. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. Up top is a Rockerverb 50, and I serviced this amp 4 or 6 months ago. I don't remember. I'll have to look up what I did on it. As I recall, it was something pretty minor, and the owner says that it is noisy now compared to when he got it back from servicing. And that could just be a tube. So we'll start with that one first. It probably will be the easier repair. And if it's just a preamp tube, then I won't have to remove the chassis from the cabinet, et cetera, et cetera. Really reduces the cost of the repair if I don't have to take apart a 70-pound amp. All right, we're going to start with this Rockerverb. Let's take it out of standby. Put on the clean channel. Noisy. Let's see how it sounds as far as noise goes. On the clean channel, there is no separate master, so it's a pretty good volume for initial testing. Let's tap on preamp tubes. And power tubes. Okay, I'm not hearing any noise on the clean channel. Let's see what the dirty channel is doing. It's a pretty high noise floor compared to the output volume. All right, now let me put the guitar down for a second and see if I've got an issue here. It would be nice for me to be able to change preamp tubes to troubleshoot that, because it sounds to me like he's just got a noisy preamp tube. But I cannot get my hand in there to access the preamp tubes without burning the snot out of myself. Let's say snot on these 6V6s. And got a broken tube retainer on that one. People sure are hard on their amps. So I am going to have to pull the chassis out to do this. So let me do that and check back with you. All right, I've got it halfway pulled from the chassis. I didn't pull it all the way because if I do that, I've got to disconnect the reverb. It becomes a pain in the butt. I looked up my service record on this. Last time it came in, it was missing a nut and dress washer, which can put stress on a solder joint, and it was full of spider webs. I replaced that nut and dress washer, cleaned out the spider webs, set the bias, made sure everything was fine. It sounded good. Right now, what I'm hearing, besides this relatively high noise floor, I think too high, is there's a noise. Well, it's almost gone now. When I move the volume pot for the gain pot for the high volume, the high gain channel. Now that volume is right before V2. The high gain channel differs from the low gain in that it uses half of V1 and both halves of V2. And the noise goes away when the channel volume is off. So that's either a problem at V2 or a problem with V1B. Since the clean channel seems fine, I'm going to change out V2 first. We put the amp in a standby so we don't have a big pop. It doesn't hurt the amp, it's irritating to have that happen with a 50 watt amp. So let's put the new tube in, take it out of standby, let that warm up, and see where the noise floor is at. Okay, I'm not getting that big noise floor now. I think that cracked it. There's still some white noise. There's always going to be some white noise, but it is much lower than the guitar signal now, which is how you want it to be. So let me give it some more gain. I'll clean that pot while I've got the thing out of the chassis. So here you can hear noise like we had before, but it is much, much farther below the noise level of the signal. The goal of any amp like this, realistically, for high gain stuff, is not to have an amp with no white noise, but you want to have the ratio between the signal and the noise to be in the signal's favor, which it pretty much is right now. Let me pause this and flip the chassis up. I'm going to clean that clean that pot a little bit. All right, after cleaning those pots out, got a lot more noise out. Given that this amp came in last time full of cobwebs that I had to clean out and a lot of dust, it's possible that this amp is stored in a dirty location. I just dropped a pick where I'll never find it. Anyway, so I'm going to test all the pots, see if any of the others need cleaning. The master did, and the gain did. The volume, the treble knob also pulls off if you look at it too hard, so I got to adjust the spline on that. I'm going to do that here real quick. Careful does it. Oh, I see what the problem is. Set screw came loose. I was expecting this to be knurled because of the pots they use, but it needs a set screw connection. I'll do that after the fact. Anyway, these pots seem okay. Reverb pot, okay. Master volume, okay. A little bit of gunk in here, but not worth changing the pot for. It's been cleaned very thoroughly, but that's a double gang pot. I have to pull the entire board to do that, so we'll kick that problem down the road. And check on the clean channel. No scratchiness. I hate the feel of these set screws on these knurled shafts. Even with a little spacer between the knurlings, they always come a little bit loose and have a little bit of a wobble to them. Anyway, let's check the treble. No noise. Bass, no noise. So I'll just tighten these up a little bit. Not too much. You don't want to compress that spline. Anyway, I'll do the rest of this off camera because it doesn't make the world's best video. But I think between the cleaning and a new 12AX7, this amp will be much happier. So let me finish this up, get it off the bench while the new tube arrives, and we'll move on to that AD30R with no power. Well, on this AD30R, the problem is pretty obvious. The rectifier tube has lost vacuum. Now, the question is, did this happen because of mechanical stress? Was the amp dropped? Did they hit a magic pothole, etc., etc.? Or did something cause it, something in the amp cause this to happen? Probably this was just a crack in the glass somewhere from just too much stress mechanically, and the amp should be okay. We should only need to change that out, but I want to be sure of that. And the owner said that the fuse was fine, and I'd be very, very surprised if the mains fuse did not blow when that happened. But let's check that out. The mains fuse is in this drawer. Okay, this one doesn't come out like on the other model. And I'm holding it to the light, and indeed, that mains fuse is very, very blown. So I suspect that the owner looked at the HT fuse. Now the HT fuse is downstream. I need to get a larger screwdriver for that. Is downstream of the rectifier tube. So when the rectifier tube blows, it'll take out the mains fuse, but the HT fuse will be fine. So this is a matter of owner education. And I'm not trying to single out the owner to make him look bad or feel bad, but so that everyone learns these things, and so this kind of thing happens less and less. People need to be able to do really basic troubleshooting on their amps. I can't get that under the pick, so I'll get the proper size screwdriver for that. And orange is cruel. A 1.56 amp fuse. Who uses a 1.56 amp fuse? I'm putting a 2 amp fuse in there. Trust me, it'll be fine. And I'll do that and put a new GZ34 in, tighten this up. And I'm going to put this all back together and then bring this up on my current limiter. I got to put the entire thing on my bench because this thing has a reverb tank, and it's all, the cables from the reverb tank are all bolted to the side wall of the cab, and then it goes straight into the chassis without a connector, so you can't just disconnect the reverb easily. And I'm trying to keep the time in this repair as little as possible for the owner's sake. So let me go get a fuse and a rectifier tube, put this back together, and then we'll see if it blows up again. All right, it's time to power this thing back up. It's all together, and I notice that it has a standby switch. And while I have the schematics for this amp, orange mysteriously does not show how they implemented standby. There's about 4 ways to do it. And one of the ways, which is what Vox did in the Custom Classic, nukes rectifier tubes. And it's possible that they did the same thing in this orange. Some amp designers skipped crucial days in amp design school. Let's put it that way. And so, like any amp that has a tube rectifier, the standby switch does nothing good, and it can, in fact, do harm. So just leave it in play all the time. And I know there's things you'll have read in magazines or things you've read on guitar forums. And what about cathode stripping? It doesn't apply to the tubes we use in guitar and bass amps. Unless you're operating a radio station with all tube technology like it's 1947, you're not going to run into any tubes that could suffer from cathode stripping. Cathode poisoning is not something that applies to standby anyway. It'd be something where you just don't have enough juice on the heater supply, which is totally separate from standby issues. And with the possible exception of cathode follower stages, more on that in other videos, there's no problem having high voltage applied to a plate before the tube is fully warmed up. And in the case of an amp which uses a tube rectifier tube, none of the preamp tubes, none of the power tubes will have any DC until until the rectifier tube has warmed up. And the rectifier tube takes longer to warm up than the output tubes or the preamp tubes. So by the time the rectifier tube is warm and generating DC to the rest of the circuit, all the other tubes are already warm. It is a perfect soft start, so to speak. So if you have an amp which has a tube rectifier and a standby switch, don't use the standby switch. It only causes problems. Yes, this applies to Fenders. Fender implemented it better than other manufacturers, but it is still totally unnecessary, and all it does is put stress on the switch, which was never designed for high DC voltage anyway, and that's how you get popping. So let's power this thing on now. And it's like any tube rectifier amp, it's going to take a minute to warm up and produce sound. No scratchiness on any of the pots, that's good. Okay, so whether it was a standby switch or the amp getting dropped, there's nothing in this amp which is causing that rectifier tube to die now if you don't use standby. So power it off, write up the ticket, bring it back to the owner.